arrow?
None of those.
Okay, fine.
You know what, actually I have an idea.
Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about all the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the season finale of Hawkeye. Now, we got a few things right about this show, we got a few things wrong. As always, I will brag about what I got right and ignore everything that I was wrong about. The title of this episode is called So This Is Christmas, which is taken from the first line of the John Lennon song, Merry Christmas, War is Over. We begin on the Kingpin, once again played by the brilliant Vincent D'Onofrio from the Daredevil Netflix show. Now, just in case you haven't seen every season of that show, we did make a recap that summarizes the lives of Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock. You should check that out if you have time. Wilson Fisk is one of my favorite MCU villains, and I'm very happy to see him back. Even though Maya appears to shoot him at the end, I think he's here to stay, for reasons I'll go into later in the video. Now, when we meet him, he's shot from below to make him appear even more imposing. Unlike in the Daredevil show, he's now using the classic cane from the comics. This may be because Daredevil ended with him giving Fisk a classic beatdown.
Call an ambulance! But not for me!
But he's changed a bit from the Daredevil show. Instead of operating from a penthouse, he meets Eleanor in a back room at one of his front businesses. Also, now he dresses like Hannibal Lecter and Marlon Brando had a baby. Sakura002 on Twitter did point out that this shirt is lifted straight from the cover of the Spider-Man comic Family Business. The video of Eleanor meeting with Fisk solves pretty much every mystery in the show, establishing that Jack is really a dumbass with nothing to hide. Kate's dad was originally in the Kingpin's debt, just like how he was a criminal who worked with Fisk in the comics. And it turns out that Eleanor wearing red doesn't mean she's the villain Madame Mask, she just wears red because the tracksuit guys wear red, and so does the Kingpin. So all the bad guys wear red. Now, if you notice, most of the guys in the tracksuit mafia are bald or have shaved heads. That's such a common thing with Marvel villains. It's like no hair means you're an instant bad guy. But someone really should have told these baddies that the best way to prevent hair loss is to start when you still have hair left. And that is why I use Keeps, the sponsor of this week's video. There's actually a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I didn't waste any time. So believe me, if your hair's starting to thin, do not put this off. Start using Keeps now. Treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results, so it's important to act fast, and you're going to have to start early and stick with it. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you will save. It's even proven to work on a Kingpin scalp. Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of their competitors, and hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication. So if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/screencrush or click the link in the description to get 50% off your first order. So, back to the Easter eggs. Clint is helping Kate cope with betrayal and says,
Kate, you're my partner.
and it never really occurred to me until this very moment that in many ways she is a replacement for Nat, just like he is a replacement for her dad, and that working with Kate has helped Clint cope with Nat's death. Maya goes to see Fisk and we see their relationship is very similar to how it plays out in the comics. Now in the books, Maya's dad was an assassin who worked for Kingpin. Fisk had him killed and then raised Maya himself to become an even deadlier assassin, and then blamed her dad's death on Daredevil. Pretty much what happens in the show, just substitute Ronin for Daredevil. Fisk name drops the Avengers.
An Avenger.
And I gotta say, I wish he'd been in this whole season. Having him in just one episode means that he pretty much shows up just so he can lose. And I think it would have been way more effective if we would have seen him the whole time doing badass Kingpin things. I don't think the twist was enough of a surprise to make it worth it. Though, look, I am still very excited to see him continue on in the MCU. Clint and Kate make trick arrows, including a Pym particle arrow and several arrows made with Stark tech, which we know because you can see his logo on them. I'm assuming that Tony made an array of arrows for Clint when they were both Avengers, and he still has access to all these old arrowheads. The trick arrow labels here are also directly taken from the comics, as are many of the arrows themselves. Then, just before the climax, Kate sums up the theme of the show.
You showed me that being a hero isn't just for people who can fly or shoot lasers out of their hands. It's for anyone.
We've talked about this before with the LARPers.
You're a superhero in real life. This is as close as I'm ever gonna get to being one.
And with the black market auction selling off pieces of the Avengers. And mostly with Rogers the Musical letting people relive the Avengers' lives vicariously. And look, I'm just gonna throw this out there. This skyline shot, You see the MetLife building? That's where Stark Tower is built, and there is no Avengers Tower right here. So either Doctor Strange erased Avengers Tower at the end of No Way Home, kind of like how the Sentry's Tower was erased in the comics, or this is a massive continuity error. Or maybe Marvel was just using this B-roll from like 2007 before they built the tower. The climactic fight takes place at 30 Rockefeller Plaza at Christmas time, which is the last place Spider-Man swings at the end of No Way Home. I don't know why Spider-Man doesn't show up to help. This is also the center of Christmas in New York, and maybe in all of America. The tree is iconic, FAO Schwarz is iconic, and all the Fifth Avenue stores have beautiful Christmas displays. So it's a fitting place to set a Christmas action set piece. I will say that there's no way Eleanor would have been dropped off right here. That area is mobbed with tourists, especially post-blip. Now I love that the LARPers are helping out in this episode because it goes back to the show's theme of anyone can be a hero. Also, in the comic book this show is based on, Hawkeye becomes close to the regular people who live in his building. So the LARPers also add that grounded element to the show. Jack is walking around with the sword, apparently because he's a jackass. He was that kid in school, you know the one who insisted that you call him by his Jedi name. Me, I'm talking about me. I do like that he gets into this fight at the end because, in the comics, he is the hero slash villain, the swordsman, who is Hawkeye's mentor. Kazi has been sent to assassinate Clint, just like his character did in the comics, and that character, by the way, was a real piece of shit. When the tracksuits pull up, they say,
Red 1 in position.
Which frankly, I felt like was a reference to Star Wars.
Red 5 standing by.
Clint's gas arrow sprays purple gas, the color of his costume from the comics. And hey, also in the show, the suit he ends up wearing matches the suit that he wears in the Matt Fraction David Asia comic. Then Yelena and Kate face off, fighting each other through Rockefeller Center. I loved how this guy, working late at night, just isn't fazed by this at all. I mean, it makes sense. New Yorkers lived through the Battle of New York, so an assassin fighting a superhero in your office, no big deal. Kate has to find the courage to jump out of the building, copying the Hawkeye maneuver that inspired her to be a hero. Then she pulls off her own clumsy three-point landing. Kazi and Clint have a fight, just like in the comics, but this one turns out way better for Clint, because in the comics, Kazi stabs out his eardrums. One thing I loved about Clint is how vulnerable he is. Like when he lands in the Christmas tree, you can feel it. Now, in the tree, Clint meets an owl. And actually, in 2020, there was an owl stowaway living in the Rockefeller tree, and they even named him Rocky, and he inspired a children's book. But don't worry, that owl was safely relocated back to the wild. So right next to the tree, there is the classic toy store FAO Schwarz, where this scene happened in the movie Big. Although technically that scene happened at the store's old address and this is their new location. But still, Kate does step on a reproduction of the big piano. The real one from the movie is in Macy's basement.
In the basement.
The LARPers change into their hero suits because it helps people to notice them and realize that they are authority figures. One of the reasons why superheroes wear bright, flashy costumes, like how the cops suddenly trusted Cap in the Avengers.
Why the hell should I take orders from you? I need men in those buildings.
During the fight, we get to see the trick arrows in action. Now some, like the magnetizing arrow, seem very much adapted from Stark gear, like the gauntlets that he gave Cap to attract his shield. But there's also hints of some of Rocket's gear that he used to fight the Ravagers. Or, maybe I'm actually just thinking of the device that Quill used to attract the Power Stone. Also, all of these shocks are a lot like the Widow Stingers that Natasha used. But my favorite arrow was this one.
Sonic boom!
Now this is all great because it shows that Hawkeye was able to adapt and learn from the extraordinary characters who have appeared in his life. Then Clint and Kate fight off the tracksuits in their own shot that mirrors the Avengers assembly scene. And the tracksuit fight ends with a shot from a Pym arrow when Clint name drops Ant-Man.
What happens to them now?
I don't know. I'll have to ask Scott about that one.
And then Rocky flies away with the truck, presumably to peel it open and adorably devour the men inside. Cute. Maya enters the last fight to get revenge on her father's killers, but notice that now she has let her hair down, a symbol that she is free of the Kingpin's control. And Yelena attacks Clint for several reasons. It isn't just because she was hired to. She thinks Clint is lying because she has survivor's guilt. I think she doesn't believe that Nat would have sacrificed herself because she wouldn't have left Yelena behind. But after Clint recounts the events of Endgame, he reassures her of how much she loved her sister. And then Yelena decides,
now we can be friends again.
I love how they incorporated their secret whistle from the Black Widow movie into this scene. And also, of course, Clint runs through the opening of that movie.
She told me about how you got separated as kids. She was flying that plane.
During the fight, Yelena brings out the electro-shock batons that the Black Widows train with, and that we first saw Natasha use in Age of Ultron. But that Kate-Kingpin fight was the showstopper for me. Two ordinary people with extraordinary abilities. And this...
Mind your own business!
...was badass. But Kingpin ended up kind of defeating himself. Kate is able to trigger one of those arrows on the ground by using the coin flip trick that Clint taught her, but she flips one of Fisk's signature cufflinks. These were kind of a big deal in the Daredevil show.
That's why I still wear these. To remind myself that I'm not cruel for the sake of cruelty. That I'm not my father.
Then Maya confronts the Kingpin just like she does in the comics after she learns the truth. Now, you might be thinking, why did they bring back Vincent D'Onofrio just to kill him? Well, in the comics, when Maya shoots the Kingpin, it just blinds him, which makes him parallel his nemesis, Matt Murdock. So, I don't know if we're going to get a new season of Daredevil or if this will be continued in the Echo Disney Plus show, but I'm betting that Kingpin is alive, just wounded and pissed off. And then Kate and Clint go to the Barton farm for Christmas. Yelena was not invited, I guess. Clint smiles when he sees the Christmas decorations on the front porch. I wonder if he was remembering when he was almost reunited with his kids in Endgame. Except now, this is not a false reunion. He is here to stay. He says,
Brought home a couple strays.
and not for the first time.
Hi. Company.
Clint gives Laura back her watch, which has a S.H.I.E.L.D. logo on the back, proving that she did meet Clint at S.H.I.E.L.D. and she left alive to raise a family. Clint must have worn this watch when he was Ronin as a tribute to her. Dan Matoes on Twitter pointed out that the watch has a number 19 on it. In the comics, Clint married a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent named Bobby Morse, aka Mockingbird, who was S.H.I.E.L.D. agent number 19. So, Laura was Mockingbird in the MCU.
Hi. Not you. Hi.
Kate and Clint burn the Ronin uniform on a grill, which is kind of neat because, in the Hawkeye comic, Clint and the other people in his building bond over rooftop barbecues. Kate is trying to think of a new name and suggests...
What do you think of Lady Hawk?
Which was a Michelle Pfeiffer movie in the 80s. And the series ends with Clint basically giving her permission to take on the name.
Lady Arrow?
None of those.
Okay, fine.
You know what? Actually, I have an idea.
And by the way, this is actually the same target that Lila was practicing on at the beginning of Endgame. The post-credits scene is an unedited song from Rogers the Musical, which we covered in depth in our episode 1 breakdown. But the song is called I Could Do This All Day, taken from Steve's signature line.
I can do this all day. I can do this all day. I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
The number also includes Ant-Man, which is funny because he was almost in the original Avengers movie, but Joss Whedon wrote him out because Edgar Wright's Ant-Man film hadn't been released yet. In the song, Steve gives everyone a job just like he does in the Avengers.
Smash! Smash! Smash!
And Hulk. Smash.
And this version adds a line about Hawkeye that we did not see in the first episode.
Hawkeye seems cool, like a really nice guy.
Now, if you're upset that this post-credits scene didn't set up any future MCU stories, take a look at this audience member. That's your mom. Well, that's all for Hawkeye. Thanks for watching our breakdowns all season. I cannot wait to break down the next Marvel show with you next year. If you have anything you want to add, any thoughts, let me know down in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.